Hey, good afternoon, everybody. We're gonna just give it a couple more minutes and we'll see if any other folks join us. So we'll probably get started here about 1:03. And might be a light group today, which I don't think anybody would be disappointed about because it could get out of here. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes.
Be fine.
And then BSOMPHOUNE. Can you rename yourself so I can just make sure to get your name right? And then also it sounds like there's a little feedback.
On my end?
Yeah.
Okay.
Which it doesn't sound like it's that anymore. So I think we might have solved it.
Okay. Because I'm connected remote. I'm trying. Okay. Thank you.
No problem.
I'll rename myself.
So we get started here about one more minute. All right, I think we basically have gotten all that we're going to get today. So first and foremost, everybody, thank you for joining this breakout group. My name is JT Chevalier. My day job, I'm the Economic Development Director for Alpine County. I know we've all had quite a bit of interaction up to this point, but just wanted to give myself a quick intro before we get started. So basically this course module is the process of sustaining change. And I know in probably all of our respective organizations and roles, there has been a lot of change in the last few years. And I think as we've seen changes occur, it's become very prevalent to sustaining that change in a manner that is repeatable and sustainable. And obviously, by way of COVID, and the way of our models of communication and meetings are drastically different. I think each one of our organizations probably uniquely has addressed the changes that have gone on and operating in your jurisdictions. And I think we might be able to glean a little bit from each one of you. So what I suggest is we'll kind of just do a round table. We'll each one of us can provide our answers to the 3 questions and maybe try to initiate some additional discussion based on it. So again, we're at the point of the sustained change that we've created. So kind of going over the John Cotter model, we first had to create a sense of urgency, build a guiding coalition, film a strategic vision, enlist a volunteer army or a team, enable action by removing barriers, generating short-term wins. And now we're kind of on that institutional change to the organization and sustaining that institutional change. So I'm just going to go ahead and hop in the questions. So the first one was the role that communication plays in sustaining change. And my response to that is, communication is critical to sustaining the change that you instituted in your organization. At the beginning of the change process, you need to establish a sense of urgency for change and communicate the vision and the plan for execution. However, once the change has been implemented, you need to switch the communications from establishing urgency to reinforcing the positive results that change created. This can be seen in Kotter's 8 steps or the refreeze model of change management. You must make the changes and institutionalize them or refreeze your organization to ensure the changes are sustained. Now, I'm going to be perfectly honest about this module. It was about the most boring module that I've been in yet. I think that it really started to kind of get into the granular weeds where we have so many different models, we have so many different graphs, and I just think that simplifying it for me makes it much easier for me to actually activate the lessons learned. So I would say what I gleaned from this lesson specifically is just the unfreeze, change, refreeze method of doing change management, because it's something that I can actually conceptualize, and it was simplistic, but it also communicated, I think, something that was, very strong in how you make change happen. So, a lot of it, this last module for me was basically watching paint dry, but that was one of my favorites. So I'm going to go to the last 2 questions, and then we'll send around the round robin. So the leader's role in working with people during times of change. What are best practices for helping to move people through the change process? And I said, first, as a leader, it's important to understand the different communication styles of your staff and how to best establish clear and open lines of communication. Secondly, you need to understand the internal motivators of your staff. Is it mission? Is it a claim? Is it money? And then finally, you need to create unique strategies for each member of your team in order to communicate the vision through the eyes of their motivations and communication style. Is there an emphasis on greater revenue generation or upward mobility? Are there incentives, either financially or otherwise, to incentivize the change process? Is the vision permeable throughout all types of motivations? Do you have consensus? Finally, give them some buy-in during the change management process. Utilize their ideas, recommendations, or observations in the process to give them ownership over the outcome. And then finally, how to best make change productivity curve as narrow and shallow as possible. This is again where I, kind of got bogged down in what these are trying to teach us, but my reflection was the best way to manipulate the change proximity curve in your benefit is to reduce the X and Y axis. By reducing the time to implement your change, you can reduce the amount of impact to performance. This is the easiest way to institute change in an effective manner. To increase performance measures is more nuanced. You can augment the access by ensuring you have the right team to perform the change, ensuring the team's adequately supplied with what they need to perform the change, ensure communication and information about the change is readily available and circulated, identify threats or negative impacts to the change, and address them as quickly and efficiently as possible. Now, I know I just kind of went on a verbal avalanche of information, so I want to kind of turn it over and open it up to this group so we can either discuss what I reflected or your own reflections for each one of those. So I'm just going to call on some folks, and if you're not ready, that's totally cool. First we'll pass it off to, just on my top left, we got Jamie Russell. So Jamie, why don't you take it away?
Sure, thanks, JT. Okay, so I kind of bulleted them out, the role that communication plays in sustaining change. So it controls the process, it creates synergy, promotes a better understanding of the goals we're trying to achieve. It ensures everybody has all of the relevant information, so everybody's on the same page, facilitates cooperation, and helps with the sense of belonging. And I can also send these to you because I'm talking fast. The leader's role in working with people during times of change and best practices for helping people move through the process. So I have listen attentively, be open-minded, show respect, have a little patience, demonstrate passion and confidence, consistently provide feedback, and celebrate wins throughout the entire process. And then how to best make the productivity curve as narrow and shallow as possible, just really making the journey as easy as possible for the team. You can use your knowledge of the change curve to give individuals the information that they may need, and it might be personalized depending on who the stakeholder is. Carefully consider impacts and objections that people might have ahead of time and try to address those ahead of time where possible. take action to minimize and mitigate any problems that people will experience, making sure that all people are well trained and are given early opportunities to experience what the changes will bring and celebrate success.
I love the celebration of success, and then also using kind of communication to create synergy. Because I think that that's something that we often don't do as effectively as we could, is first not just communicate, but make sure that there's synergy within that communication. So, me just saying something to you necessarily isn't communication. You being able to absorb that and reflect it in kind of through your own lens or your own vision, I think is important. And then kind of settling on that shared effort to move forward through synergy, I think is a really good note. And of course, celebrate. And I just don't think that we do enough of that in all of our organizations, because by the time the change is implemented, we're already either working on implementing the next change or the next fire drill that we're having to do through the change process. So I love that celebration. I need to do more of that.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Me
Well,
too.
thank you very much, Katie.
Thanks.
Next we'll go ahead. Anna, why don't you take it away?
Okay. I also didn't care for this tremendously. But I got some good quotes, and I'm not going to answer the questions because I think they're dumb. Sorry, that's not being a very good team player.
Hey, no, I like it.
So the struggle I have with this is that our office lives in change that comes from outside sources constantly. We don't get to choose when the change takes place. Someone else decides it for us, and I know that affects everybody, but that's how it works for us. So as an example, I know Joe was talking about it earlier, but Tuesday the Board of Supervisors voted that they couldn't decide to take away our voting system and which one they wanted. So we're waiting another 30 days before we know what our main tool is to count votes with. And they also decided they wanted us to begin working on a process for hand tallying votes to be certified by the state of California. The only way you can hand tally votes is that if you have you have to have a way to audit them after you hand tally all 100,000 of them. And to audit them, you have to have a system that's certified by the Secretary of State, which means you have to use a voting system to audit your hand count. So it's kind of a mess. But in that note, as I'm reading through all of this, there was some cool stuff with all the changes we go through that I pulled out that I thought were little brain farts for me to hold on to. So one of them was the first example that was given about the guy in the engine room. The guys in the engine room are the front line. So because I'm not at the top, I have the 15, 20 staff underneath me. So I'm one of the filters, right? As far as the chain of command goes. So decisions are made, and they're made quickly, and they're expected to be implemented quickly. But what that does to the guys at the bottom of the ship is leaves them slamming up against the walls, trying to keep up. So there's a lot to be said for, yes, implementing change, but doing it slow enough so that it can be done correctly and efficiently, instead of putting a lot of height on it being done quickly. So I thought that scenario was kind of cool that they went over about the guys in the engine room bouncing back and forth while the guy at the top of the ship was yanking the wheel around back and forth. I also thought the editorial calendar was a cool tool. I'm actually going to use that with all the change that we have coming up. We're also looking at hopefully relocating and getting an entirely new building in the midst of all of this. So I thought that was a cool tool. I liked, sorry, I'm reading my notes. It's not the change that's hard, it's the level of readiness that determines the hardness in the change. So it's how ready you are when the change comes as to how hard the change is going to be. I really didn't like what one of the ladies said. She said there was a point in there where she said an employee comes to you and they received a change with 20% more work, and the employee's complaining because they can't handle the workload. And she basically was saying the problem is the employee, because they weren't ready for the 20% workload and they're not adapting to the 20% increase in the workload. I probably totally misinterpreted it, but I was like, I feel like that's a managing thing. If you're going to put more work on your staff, you should be empowering them with the tools to be able to accommodate the extra work. What else can I ramble about, oh, sometimes we fail to preserve what we fail to preserve is more important than what we've created. So I know with all of the change that is constantly happening, that has happened in our office, where instead of holding on to something that we should have valued a little bit more, we kind of let it go by the wayside because we were in such a rush to implement something different. So sometimes we don't hold on to something that's more important. If we only focus on creating and preserving and don't eliminate, we become chronically overcommitted. I thought the eliminating portion of that really weird circle diagram that they had was pretty cool, because you do have to eliminate. And unfortunately, there's a lot of connection when you have a new process that is made and it works. People tend to be almost emotionally connected to that. And so when you start creating a new process that trumps that and makes it go by the wayside, it's difficult for people to let go of that because they think that there's still a lot of value in it. So learning to not hold on to everything. You have to be able to eliminate old processes and move on. That's what I got.
Yeah, I think those are a lot of really good nuggets, and I completely agree. I did think that the questions weren't the best prompts for us to kind of like get the best information. And you know, one thing I found very interesting is, I'll just share my screen real quick, is this, you know, Kubler-Ross change curve that really kind of mimics the 8 stages of grief. And it's kind of weird to kind of have that tie-in of, okay, you know, is our grief and change tied hand in hand, or, you know, is grief a part of the change process? And I truly think that it is, and it would be I think a bad assumption for us to make that we're not impacting people, not only organizationally but emotionally, maybe even physically, when we ask them to make these changes. And so to kind of understand each one of those motivations and impacts, I think is great. And you know, I also kind of took that, you know, one thing that rubbed you wrong, I almost reflected on it in the same fashion. And I do think that there's difference between leading and managing, and there's a tie in there. So thank you, appreciate those reflections. And now we'll move it on down the line. And next I got Christy. So do you want to go ahead and take it away?
Okay, so I'm with Anna. I didn't like this section at all. I kind of got lost in it while I'm watching the videos, and I'm like reverting my thoughts elsewhere. It was hard. I did, you know, take some notes. There was a couple things that were said. The strategic road mapping and how we operate. I wrote that. Assessing, analyzing, and acting. I did save that part. I wanted to go back and kind of look at it. Map out your vision, go back and periodically assign the workload. Let them map it and remind them that they wanted it. I thought that was pretty interesting. I think if you let them be a part of it in the decision making, like this is the vision I want. Now you tell me how you're going to do it. I think it means more to them. And then that way, when it comes back and they want to say something, well, this is what you agreed on, this is what you did, right? And I think that's kind of empowering for them. And again, like Anna, our changes that I have here in the jail all depend on the state. I mean, we get state mandates all the time, and so we're constantly changing. So it's not like my organization is. It's the rules, you know, the laws of the state, and how we have to change that, and how we conduct our business inside the jail. So on the questions, I didn't even answer number 3. The leader's role in working. I think, you know, it's important for us to stay positive, give credit where credit's due. We need to be very good listeners. Always make adjustments through change, because you have a vision, it could change in the middle, and you have to be aware of that and be able to adapt to the changes in the middle. Have patience. The role that communication plays. I mean, I don't know. I don't think I answered it right. Mine was like, you know, without communication, it's going to fail, obviously. So that's all I have. I'm sorry. This was not my week. I just wasn't into this one at all.
I mean, I'm gonna be perfectly honest, some of these modules I had to rewatch or reread like 15 times. I mean, I was never a guy that was good in math in college, and I felt like I was right back in my, college math classes for statistics, just staring at the same thing, hoping that it would land. And I think that again, it's, there's a way to overcomplicate and oversimplify, and I think that this led a little bit more towards overcomplication, as far as sustaining change. But like what I'm really kind of pulling from what you're saying, and this is something that I really truly believe in, is that empowering your employees to have ownership over the process, and the outcome. And it's, one, it's kind of a CYA for us. It covers our butts because we're getting that feedback, but we're also empowering them in the mission so that they feel ownership over the result, right? And it's really easy to tell someone, how to get from point A to point B, but they really truly learn the journey if they help guide that, that journey. Really truly is what it is. And like you said, let them kind of map out their way, and that will truly create some value within them over that outcome. And I think that'll it'll make instituting that change easier. But as we look at retention and attrition through change management, I think you're going to see that reduction of loss of staff or anybody else because they're resistant to change because they felt that they had a part of it. And I think the unfortunate part that we all probably experience in working for elected bodies, or in times where there might have been emergency declarations or orders in which truly it was one person that had the power to make a decision for an entire organization, and they had to do it like that. The problem is when there's no buy-in or ownership or feeling that you're being listened to within your department or your process or organization. Well, what did we see? We saw the Great Resignation, right? I think that's case in point of not involving people in that change management process and giving them ownership, to where when they are faced with this change, it almost becomes more of an ultimatum, less of the process. And so I think that that's valuable as we kind of move back towards the ability to be participatory, because it's not this danger, have to make the decision now, or elected bodies making the decision. It's now we can kind of start to re-engage those members of our organization that might have been disenfranchised through the last 3 years. So I think those were very valuable notes. So so far, I think we got like 3 thumbs down on this module. So I'm going to reflect that in my Google review. But all right, Jose, we're going to throw it over to you. What did you pull out of this?
I think I did find the reading a little bit convoluted. But I guess really for me, the big sticking point, for all the talk of communication, I feel like the aspect of communication that I feel is kind of really important is engaging staff in the discussion about solutions. So very little discussion around dialogue. And, because I think in terms of what I think works well is allowing staff to feel like they're part of the solution. So really having that back and forth. I think the communication calendar is a good idea, especially you go on these listening tours, trying to get feedback from staff about the current situation and what they think the solutions are, and really getting their buy-in, making them feel part of the solution, and hopefully that works to promote, just a better outcome moving forward. So I think really that's where we, and at least in my environment, we kind of really fall short. There's a lot of top-down approach to change, and that transparency and communication not being there. So that's that, really buy into it. What else did I have? Yeah, but otherwise I think communication just kind of every step of the way. Last week we talked about just communicating the right information at the right time. So not overburdening people with too much information, giving them what they need when they need it, as an effective way to think about what information. And again, going back to the calendar, I think segmenting it, having a plan, being consistent with your communication, I think is a really good idea. I think in terms of what works as a good practice, I mean, those same things in terms of communication. I think the other thing is don't underestimate what staff need in terms of resources for making a change. So I thought it was funny, and I thought it was good. You know, the doctor was talking about how they were going to close down one site and all those people would have to change to another site. And getting to the point where you're talking to staff about how they're going to get to the office at the new site. Like, will they have to take the subway? Do they have to park in a new location? So that level of detail to try to soften the blow and to try to give people reassurances that this change is gonna work out. So that level of detail, I thought, that's interesting. And that made me think about one of the major flaws in communicating or just mentality wise is they should want to do, staff should want to do this because that's what they get paid for. Like, okay. And so breaking that idea, you know, in my mind, it's you were paying them to do this and now you're changing that. So the motivation, maybe the pay has to change with what you're asking them to change. So anyway, and then the last thing, for me, for question 3, just leadership support. Sometimes I do feel like, again, this top-down approach and the expectation is get it done, and we don't kind of hear from higher ups about how it's going, putting positive messaging out, being at events, ensuring that, you know, they are visible in terms of the process. So, so just having that leadership presence, support, messaging, kind of every step of the way.
Great, thank you for that, Jose. And you know, kind of a couple of things that landed with me, and I think kind of a general theme, building off of Jamie's reflections is, you know, communication without engaging staff and creating that synergy isn't communication, right? So you said something that I really attached to, and that was back and forth communication, because that implies it's a two-way directional process instead of just saying communication. But having that back and forth, I think, is vital in ensuring that not only are you providing information to them, but you're receiving their reflections on how that information is taken in. And of course, transparency, right? I think that that's something that, you know, I see a lot within our organization is our department heads. You know, we have the department head meeting once every 2 weeks. And it's good in a sense to have all the departments communicating, but I think the only negative that exists with the optics of it is you have the, you know, heads of the departments go into this closed door room and we have these communications. And then we go back and we operate within our departments. And I think the optics to our, you know, staff and lower management is, well, why are they going into this closed door meeting and talking about our departments without us present? And so to communicate transparently what came out of those meetings, obviously appropriately to your staff on that level, I think creates more of a sense of understanding to say, hey, I received communication from our elected officials, from my CAO. These are our directives. We talked about these today. Here's how they impact our department. Instead of just coming out of these meetings and being like, this is what we're going to do now. I think that's an important piece. And I also like that, you know, don't underestimate what your staff needs. You know, a lot of us might be very self-sufficient. We might have all the tools in the toolbox, but we also need to anticipate maybe the gaps in resources or communication with staff and make sure that they're adequately supplied. Because I think that, your other comment to there needs to be a level of detail in change management, because if you can be as detailed as possible, like how people are going to get to and from work, it limits the unknowns. And I think everybody, it's human nature to have a fear of the unknown. So the less of those that we have, the less fearful we are in moving forward, on the journey of change, right? And getting to that destination. So I loved all those elements. So cool. Well, we have the last one. Bovan, I think it's your turn.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep, loud and clear.
Okay, thank you. I also struggled with this module. I had a hard time trying to absorb the information and had to go through some of the modules a couple times. My office, we actually did undergo a major change, and that was in 2017. We changed our one of our major programs that we use, and I was trying to relate that to the materials, and I was kind of having a hard time. But I was trying to make sense of it with that. So kind of from what my experience, so the role that communication plays in sustaining change, I think that's very important. And communication, I think more for me was staying current with my team to see what they were struggling with, to figure out processes, get them involved in figure out what that process was going to look like for them, because ultimately it impacts them and their daily work. So from my level downwards, I try to include them and involve them in establishing the new processes as we came across them, because pretty much everything had to kind of, not everything, but a lot of our processes had to change. The leader's role in working with people during times of change, what are best practices for helping to move people through the change process. So we fortunately, I guess in some ways, we had a lot of new staff, and the new staff, they didn't have much to compare it to, so then they just took it on and moved forward. The older staff were the ones who struggled more. They were the ones, I guess, that you can say experienced the grief, the loss, and the frustration, because they're wanting their old system. And I guess also too, when you make a change, you're making a change for the better, and the people can see that it's a change for the better. I think it's easier for them to adapt. But when it's a system that maybe in their mind is harder, well, one, the learning curve is going to be a challenge for everybody. So that's already going to contribute to their level of frustration that some of the newer staff may not have. And I think what I find is that it's important for me to make sure that these people are not falling behind in their adaptation of the new system. Kind of like what everybody's been saying is pay attention to them and don't disregard their complaint. Figure out what they're struggling with and how you can help them, like maybe training, I don't know, helping them, walk them through the new system and try to figure out how to do things the different way, or having them work with someone who was able to better adapt, so that that person can help them, walk them through whatever their struggles are. But yeah, the communication, maintaining that communication to make sure that everybody has what they need to move forward is important. How to make the curve as narrow and shallow as possible. I think this goes back to the communication in my mind, because it's unfair, I guess, or maybe it's not a productive way to say, to always think that the failing employee is failing because their unwillingness to adapt. There may be other things going on that you as a manager or leader needs to figure out what's going on and how you might be able to help them out to make that less challenging for them. And that's pretty much it.
I think there's some really good stuff in there, and I'm just going to mute you just because we're getting a little feedback. But staying current with the team, kind of quote unquote checking in, I think is valuable. Typically in change management or just in like normal operations, right? We have our set staff meeting, where it's a formalized, maybe it's once a month, once every 2 weeks, in which we have staff come. They expect to have a meeting. They're able to either voice concerns or address topics on maybe your staff agenda. But I think that there is a real benefit to the check-in, right? And the check-in could be as easy as poking your head in their office or their cubicle or saying, hey, how's everything going? How's your weekend? Maybe it's not even has anything to do with the change process, but it's just a general check-in with staff that isn't formalized. So they don't need to feel maybe defensive or that they have to prepare for something, and that just a general conversation. I think that you get a lot of great nuggets and connections when you check in with your staff at a time where it might be at their desk. They don't feel disempowered. It's not as much of a manager staff level relationship. And of course, it doesn't necessarily have to be about the change. It could just be about just life in general. I think it really kind of allows people to shed the armor, practice vulnerability, and personalize and humanize the relationship, and especially important in the change process, because that's, as we've seen, is where a lot of the friction comes in. And to your point, there is sometimes a real benefit to new staff, and they don't have bad habits. And I say that in jest, but they don't have established practices that they're used to. And of course, people fear of the unknown, this fear of change. If I've been comfortable doing something like, let's just put it this way, the way I've been snow blowing my driveway every single day for the last 3 months, because it just never stops snowing up here in the Sierra Nevadas. I've established a way that I do it. I do it because this is the way that I've done it. I've created an efficiency in how I do it. And if someone were to come in tomorrow and tell me that I need to do it a different way, I would challenge that, right? I would say, hey, no, I've been doing it like this since November. And this is why you go this line, because it pushes the snow that way and it pushes the snow that way, and then it dries appropriately. And they're like, well, no. You can actually do it this way, and this way. And it's actually more efficient. You use less gas, you get it done faster. And at the end of the day, you work less. Well, okay. All right. Now I'm kind of understanding that, as opposed to just someone coming in and being like, how do I snow blow the driveway? And then you get to teach them that from the very beginning, the way that you envisioned it. So I just think that's the kind of give and take that we're seeing in our organization, that you guys probably see in your organizations, is new staff is great because they don't have bad habits. Obviously there's a longer learning curve. They might not be as skilled as the older staff. And the older staff, the challenge is they have those established best practices that they've used, and to kind of free them from those binds and to make them flexible is very difficult. And that's where it takes a ton of work. And I think that the give and take that we have to think about when we're doing a significant change like this is, okay, if I lose a lot of old staff that have a lot of institutional knowledge and skills that have been developed over the years and relationships, and I lose them because I didn't progress through the change management process effectively, is that loss greater to the organization than if I were to lose them and then I have to bring on new staff and train them from a green standpoint about everything that we do within our organization and this change management in the middle of a change management process, right? And so it's like, for me, I think if we do a little bit of that front-loaded work and communicating the value of the change, getting the people on the team, forming the guiding coalition, communicating early and often, that we can usher those people through that difficult process and give them shared wins, empower them with ownership over the process. And then we might be able to even strengthen our bond as we move through that process, instead of coming in and being like, this is the change, you're either on the bus or you're off the bus. If you're off the bus, great. Have a good retirement. We'll see you later. We're going to hire a bunch of new people. I get to tell them exactly how I do things. And then how good of a leader am I, right? I think it takes a real leader to overcome that adversity, to be humanized, but also be able to reach and create effective organizational change. So I tend to say the older staff, that investment is worth it in my eyes. I do want to give you another chance to speak, Bovan, because I know I kind of took that one over.
No, I agree. I think what you said has a lot of weight, and you know, it's like I said, everybody's going to struggle differently and adapt at a different pace. And you know, as a manager or supervisor, you kind of have to understand what these struggles are and how to work through them with your staff to get them where, you know, you want them to be. Some people will just be unable to, and some people, you know, it just takes a little bit more time for them. And like I said, if they perceive the change to be a positive change, I think it's easier for people to accept. But for most people, a change is not seen as something positive, because they have to relearn and you know, change however they're doing what they understood to be how things should be done. So yeah, we're still going through it, and we're still figuring out our way through this change. So, and that, like I said, it's been since 2017. So it's not an easy task. And I guess I had a hard time relating to the material, because the material, of course, it's what do you call it, where it's like a theory based thing, where it's things are supposed to fit in this way or that way, and it doesn't, at least not always. And it's not that simple.
And you know, I think that you bring up a great point. It's you know, when you think about a positive change, even regardless of how much positive is involved in the outcome, there is inherently some negativity attached to it, right? Whether it's the resistance to change, whether it's internal, external challenges, supplies, those types of things. So even if we view the change, you know, overall as a positive change, we need to acknowledge and accept the negative that is built into the positive change, and try to communicate very early that the end result is worth the friction to get there. But like, you know, I kind of think of change as like you're running in sand. You know, you're still going to get to your destination, and that's going to be the positive, right, that you want to do. But it's going to take some work to get there. And sometimes it's going to feel like you're not getting there. But if you just can continually reinforce that, you know, I'm going to end at the tiki bar at the end of this beach, and then I'm going to be able to have a margarita, you know, that kind of keeps you running down that beach, right? Keeps you doing the 2 steps forward, 1 step back, because you're inevitably going to get there. So thank you for that, Bovan. I appreciate that reflection. Well, it turns out that, again, this wasn't the most exciting module for all of us, but it sounds like we all kind of slogged through it. And I appreciate all your guys' time. 1:43, at the risk of taking up more oxygen in the room and time on your guys' day. Do want to give you those minutes back if you want them. If anybody has any last things they'd like to say, feel free, or if not, I look forward to seeing you guys all tomorrow. Seeing none, hearing none. Jamie, did you have anything else?
Nope, I just wanted to say bye and thank you, and I'll see you all tomorrow.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. You have a wonderful, safe rest of your day. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you. You too.